The NBA draft is being held this week, Wednesday and Thursday night. And what a day to talk about NC State basketball and maybe some future draft picks for the Wolfpack. And so we're going to discuss that today. But before we get going, as always, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel at Inside Pack Sports. I've got Jake McSwain with me. And Jake, the draft is going on. We're taping this here Thursday morning. We've already seen the first round, a lot of ACC players in the first round being selective. Nobody from NC State. I want to ask you, I know you're a big NBA guy. Did anything surprise you with the draft that you've seen so far? What stood out to you about the draft?
Man, so I was shocked a little bit at the Hornets
Mm-hmm.
drafting Con Kneppel over Trey Johnson and a couple other options that they had available to him. Because I feel like when you're a franchise like that, you got to take some big swings and potentially misses on talent. And it's just, I don't know that the upside's there. But you saw some teams make some picks based on upside. And I think that's what you kind of got to look for.
Yeah, I wonder if the Con Knipple pick for Charlotte was a kind of a more buy-in to LaMelo Ball, right? To put some shooting and some spacing around him. And you wonder if some of the other options that could have been there, whether it's an Ace Bailey or a Trey Johnson, you kind
Yeah.
of felt like clashed with. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I just think maybe that's the thought process on it, right? Is you need some shooting on that roster.
Yeah, but that's where I don't get it. Like, is Trey Johnson is such a good shooter still, and it's like you get the upside of
Hmm.
that athleticism, projectability. So it's like, what are we doing here? I guess I just don't get it, man. But
Well, look, we're,
it's
we're based in North Carolina, so we are going to talk a little bit about the Hornets for those of you who don't know. But let's circle this back to NC State. We know Will Wade is trying to do something here at NC State that really State struggled with in recent years. You go all the way back to Dennis Smith. I mean, this has been a program that frankly haven't had players drafted uh, in a while. And so, if you look at what Will Wade's done, specifically at LSU, when you talk about guys like Naz Reid and Tari Eason and Cam Thomas, he's had multiple draft picks there. And so, can he bring that type of talent to NC State, that type of talent to Raleigh? We think so. And we think maybe he has, Jake. And so, we're going to look at NC State's current roster and try and project it ahead to next year and maybe even a couple years after that. We'll see. But for you, on the surface, if you had to pick one player on NC State's current roster who you would say, I believe that man is an NBA draft pick, who would it be?
yeah. So I think for me, if I'm being objective and if I were to put money on the line for it, the guy who is most likely to get drafted, and it's going to be no surprise, but it's Darion Williams. Like, I mean, he is somebody who probably could have been like a second round pick this year. And I don't think it would have surprised people had he stayed in and gotten drafted in that kind of area. The measurable concerns aren't going to go away. I don't know what else he can really do from a pure numbers and volume perspective for NC State next year, but I think if they have a good year, like and he leads and like he is the unquestioned leader of this team, which he will be, then that's a situation where maybe he starts getting into the later parts of the first round next year's draft.
Yeah, and I think for me, man, Matthew Abel is a guy who stands out athletically as a player who I think fits the mold of a draft pick. I was watching some of the guys go through that you saw, whether that was Carter Bryant, for instance, from Arizona, who was
Yep.
drafted. You saw some of these big 3 and D wings that get picked, and he has that type of a profile to where if it clicks for him, he has a chance. And like I said, I mean, a lot of this is based on potential and things you show. I mentioned Carter Bryant earlier from Arizona. I want to say he averaged 6.5 points per game last year for Arizona and was drafted 14th overall because of the upside.
Oh yeah.
So a guy like Matthew Abel, I think with his skill set could certainly fit that as well.
And that was where I was going to go second. Where I because
Mm-hmm.
my opinion on that is if NC State has a lottery pick on its roster next year, then that's going to be Matthew Abel in my opinion. Like I think he has the tools that teams are looking for. And you mentioned Carter Bryant getting drafted. Like he averaged 6.5 points a game last year. But you hear analysts talk about him. He shot like 38% from three. He had some highlights of just getting to the rim and finishing, aggressively, like dunking on people. And he did a lot of those things that don't show up on highlight tapes as well. Like he was a good defender. And I think that's an archetype for the type of role that Matthew Abel could have next year. He's the type of guy with his athletic background and kind of the frame that he already has. I feel like he could play himself into an opportunity like that where he is, that mid to late lottery type pick just based off of NC State having a really good year, him doing those things that you can put on tape and it lines up well. So he just kind of has that NBA mold. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the thing he has on his side is time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because let's be honest, freshmen and sophomores, they get the benefit of the doubt oftentimes in terms of projectability, right? We're talking about this. We keep going to Carter Bryant. If you were a senior in college, Jake, and average 6.5 points per game, would you be a lottery pick? More than likely not,
No, not even
right?
close.
And so I think that's an advantage a guy like Matthew Abel could have. And when you look at the rest of NC State's roster, that's where I think the questions in here becomes, because it is a roster that's loaded with players in the juniors and seniors class. And so when you look at some of those guys, I think the man I would go to first would probably be Terrence Arseno. I think kind of a similar type of build and game that we're referencing here with Bryant and Matthew Abel, in terms of just being able, another guy, Cedric Coward, right? We saw him get drafted, who was on track to go to Duke, and he ends up being a lottery pick as a 3-and-D type wing. We love Terrance Arseno's defense here. He hasn't had a chance at Houston to get that every night high usage role. If he can potentially get that at NC State, and with what he can do on the defensive end, he's another player I think potentially could work himself into being a draft pick.
Yeah, I see that as being a possibility, especially with his defense and just what he like
Mm-hmm.
NBA teams looking for that in perimeter defense and guys with some length and versatility to their game. So that to me that makes a ton of sense. Um, I'll backtrack because I just want to say on the record I am so thankful that Cedric Coward did not make it to Duke because if he's healthy, that guy is a problem. Like he would have
Mm-hmm.
been very difficult to deal with and is just someone that's super impressive. Like I don't know if you've watched any interviews of his, and I know we're
Yeah.
sidetracking here, but like he's gonna be a guy who works. He's gonna be a front office NBA guy for a long time after he graduates or after he's finished his playing career. But so Terrence Arsenoux, I could see him fitting into a mold like that where he kind of steps into an elevated role. Probably he has to show a little bit more on offense next year, I would say, like just from a volume perspective. But he could be one that you see latch into the NBA. Another guy that I was thinking of is Jerry Ding. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really interesting because I really believe he's going to get more of a role next year and his skill set matches what a lot of NBA teams are looking for. Like he has that Jeff Green type of game where if he can show that on the college level, I think you might see some NBA teams get interested, especially if he's shooting the ball as well as he could. Because you look at a guy, I mean, a little bit different of a circumstance, but you look at a Danny Wolf out of Michigan, like was at Yale, productive, steps into a role at Michigan, kind of exceeds everyone's expectation and ends up being a first round pick the following year. So it's not unheard of. Like there's going to be a guy next year that does that or a couple guys next year that does that. And I think NC State's found some dudes that could potentially fill that role.
Jerry Dean just completed his second year on the college level at Florida State. A lot of people don't know this. He declared for the draft this year, and he
Mm-hmm.
had workouts with teams. We were trying to line up an interview with him. We eventually got it, but when I was first trying to line up an interview with him, he sent me a message saying he had just finished a workout with the Bucks and would
Mm-hmm.
call me whenever he was back in town. That tells you he's on radars, right? Folks may not know that, but yeah, his skill set screams potential NBA professional player. Now, is he going to be a draft pick? I don't know. I don't know if he's going to get the usage and like the opportunity to have that type of a role. But when you're his size and can shoot the basketball the way he can, he could potentially get that opportunity. And the final guy I wanted to throw out there to you, returning player for NC State, Paul McNeel. We know Paul has an exciting offensive skill set. He flashed at times as a true freshman for NC State. He's probably kind of in that same mold as Matthew Abel. We don't talk a lot about him because Abel is the new guy, right? And that's the one that's kind of generating a lot of headlines. But I think Paul McNeel has some potential bust out, breakout opportunity to where he maybe could fit into that next year or down the road as well.
Yeah, Paul McNeil's someone that I think has that potential from a scoring perspective. Like if he gets a very legitimate role within NC State's offense throughout the year, and he is able to consistently make shots and keep his efficiency to a point that everyone's happy with, and he's a guy that could get. I mean, he could play himself into getting drafted. I mean, he has that offensive upside, and he has to probably show a little bit more on defense. Kind of the opposite of a Terrence Arseno. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's got to be someone that becomes at least a Power 5 average level defender, because if he's not, then he's got to be just something else on offense to get that shot. And I don't know if I ever see him being that efficient of a player. And he doesn't have to be really good, by the way. Like he can be a marginally efficient player and still be a really good college basketball player. So that's not what I'm trying to say at all. But I think it's just he's an interesting case too, because he's also really young. I don't know if there's a world where, like we said, Matthew Abel has a pretty good chance of playing into that kind of draft status. I don't know if there's a world where both Abel and McNeel are in that draft consideration at the same time next year. And if there is, then it's really good for NC State.
Yeah, and finally, I want to add, look, this could be a process for Will Wade and his staff as well. If you go back to his first year at LSU, they went 8-10 that year, I believe, in the SEC. I don't believe they had an NBA player on that roster, but what did he do in the next incoming class? He signed Naz Reid, and he
Mm-hmm.
followed it up a couple years later with Cam Thomas. And we know on the recruiting trail, Will Wade, Andrew Slater, they are targeting big fish in the prep ranks. Like they are not looking to land top 150, top 100 players. They are going after top 10, top 15, top 20 recruits, trying to land another guy. Matthew Abel was a top 25 prospect coming out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
They're targeting players who have the profiles to be instant impact players on the college level. And if you're an impact player as a freshman, Jake, you're likely getting drafted.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's where I think it's really interesting. If you can see it across the scroll at the bottom. You guys, if you're not subscribed to IPS, go to InsidePackSports.com and subscribe. We had a pretty comprehensive list of all of the targets over the next two graduating classes for high school basketball that NC State is talking to, bringing in for visits, and it's impressive. Like there's a lot of stars next to names amongst that group,
Mm-hmm.
and some that NC State has connections to already. I think what you're going to see happen is you're going to have ideally like a couple of those Matthew Abel level talents every year. So when we have these discussions for years to come, it's like you could really start seeing a bit of a pipeline. And Wade, to your point, started doing that at LSU. Had Tari Easons of the world and Naz Reid's. Like that's the type of talent that he wants to land. And I think you have to be really encouraged that he was able to do it year one. And then you start seeing some success, and it's, to me, that's the ideal formula for building a college basketball
Mm-hmm.
program that is very consistently a winner. Like I hate to throw out Duke as an example, but
Mm-hmm.
Duke last year, and this is a little bit abnormal for them, but they had three freshmen obviously that were top 10 level picks. And then but we look at what surrounded those pieces,
Right.
and it was transfer portal guys who made so much sense to surround with those types of freshman talent. Like you had a Mason Gillis from Purdue who could shoot the ball, had identifiable skill, lots of leadership, and a proven winner type of program. Then you bring in a guy like Sion James, who was really a critical piece for them because he could do a lot. He could, he was experienced college player, proven production, was willing to maybe take a step back as far as usage goes to come to Duke. And then they had other pieces that were returning. So, I think it's just so difficult. Like, look at Rutgers last year. Rutgers, was able to bring in two top 10 picks, but they didn't have the complementary pieces around them in order to make things happen. So I think you're looking at successful teams that are bringing in freshmen who make big impacts, but they're also surrounding them with talent that is fringy NBA, professional level talent, but experience with them as well. And I think you're seeing that starting right now at NC State. And over the years, you're going to start seeing probably more of a mix of that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, look, Andrew Slater, NC State's assistant coach, GM, has spent time on the recruiting side in terms of covering recruiting. We know he spent time with OKC as a scout. He understands talent and acquisition of talent. We know Will Wade does as well. It's going to be a focal point in terms of landing high quality NBA talent. And like you said, mixing around it, these other pieces. Before we get going, you have to put money on it. One guy. Well, one guy is going to be, let's not even say will play in the NBA because guys can make it there as undrafted players. We know that.
Yeah.
You got to put money on one guy being drafted from off NC State's current roster. Who would it be?
So I'll kind of recap what I've said in this conversation. So I think if I'm putting money on who is going to get drafted, no matter what, is there, I think Darion Williams gets drafted second round, worst case scenario. Like, unless something really, the wheels fall off or or an injury, I think he's worth a second round pick and would probably get drafted just as a piece that can do some things for you. If I'm picking money on who gets drafted in the lottery, again, that's Matthew Abel. I think Matthew Abel is the most lottery type prospect NC State has. What about you?
I think Williams is the smart choice. You know, even with Abel, I think there's a little bit of risk there in terms of, you mentioned the Paul McNeel angle, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if Paul McNeel beats him out? Like, there's a world that could happen to where he could be more, and he's just a sophomore. I mean, he could be on that same arc as well. And I think, given that Darion Williams has already gone through the process of going to the combine, you know, working out for teams, getting feedback, and the role we're expecting him to have, we just taped one of these features here on him being preseason ACC Player of the Year potentially. Look, there's no world where I see him being an ACC Player of the Year and him going undrafted with his just total profile, because he's one of those players where some guys just produce their way to being a draft pick. You get where I'm coming from? It's like, hey, you can knock my measurables, you can knock whatever you want to knock, but I can produce myself into being a second round draft pick and to earn an opportunity because I was just so damn good on the college level. I think he could be one of those guys.
Let me introduce you to Mr. Armando Bacot and RJ Davis.
Yeah. I would go their last. Maybe I should change it to their last year. I know RJ didn't have that year this year. But I do think he has also more of an NBA game.
He does.
And size and things that, like, you know, a little different than them. But you're right. I mean, there's no guarantees. There are no guarantees. And I think he also, like we said, there are some red flags with him on that level, which is probably why, if we're being honest, Jakey's back on the college side. And so I think it's interesting. It's an interesting debate. I still believe, though, that big picture, even if you were to ask Will Wade and his staff, they would tell you this might not be my NBA team in terms of multiple potential NBA players. It's going to take a couple years to probably get that team in place where you go to, like I said, go to his late tenure. I want to say it was his fourth year LSU team, the team that won the league. I believe that team finished. Yeah, you know, it had multiple NBA draft picks on it. In terms of, you know, we talked about guys like Cam Thomas, you mentioned Tari Eason. So I think it could be down the road, but we know there's some talent here already. I mean, guys like Terrence Arseno, we mentioned several. I like the Jerry Dean pick as a player who is a sneaky potential NBA draft guy if he gets a larger opportunity. So we wanted to discuss NC State men's basketball a little bit today with the draft going on, taking a look at the roster, giving you some insight onto some players who could potentially find themselves drafted next season. As always, I'd like to remind everyone, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe at Inside Pack Sports. Also, check out the website, www.insidepacksports.com, for more coverage. You saw the scroll. We've got plenty of content coming out here on football recruiting, basketball recruiting, all those different things. So appreciate everyone joining us, and we'll do it again here soon.